Man, have I been wanting to talk about this Oasis album for absolutely ages, and I'm finally getting round to talking about it. I'm really excited to be mentioning this one in a review because it's been one of my favourite albums of the year so far, and I've just been taking a little bit of a while to finally get round to reviewing it. It did come out in March. I've been listening to it for the past month or so-ish, and I've got to say, I've been having a great time with it. I've been having such fun listening to Addy's approach to neo-soul and R&B and pop. It's been a really fun listen for the last month or so. Perhaps cliche to say, but I think heading into the summer months, this is a really good listen as well. I think if you're wanting something that is a bit more on the brighter side of things, a bit more on the side of things that just pops and feels really carefree and, you know, free-spirited, then this album is exactly the kind of album that you're going to be wanting to hear for the summer. There's lots of elements to it as well that remind me of other artists that I think are worthy of high praise, just like Oasis is. I mean, the first track is pretty much just kind of like a prelude, really, Lad Depart. Really reminiscent of some Kali Uchis, this one, you know. I feel like there are some moments across this album where she does kind of go into the softer side of things that do remind me a little bit of something that Kali would do on her kind of slower R&B jams as well. But beyond that though, you've got tracks like Get It Got It, where her voice is just absolutely full of life. The horns are just so tasty. This is one of the best bops of the year for sure. I have such a fun time whenever this track comes on. It just lightens your mood. It just livens you as well. It makes you feel like you just kind of want to get up and dance. It's a great little track, this one. And as well as that, you've got Serena as well, which is a track where she starts to highlight some of the odd nasal tones that come through in her voice. Like, she does this across the album a lot, but you notice that she reaches some really strange notes that I find to be quite peculiar on the ears. I actually do think for some people this might get a little bit irritating. I mean, I'm not saying it does for me, because obviously I'm praising the song and the album, but I could imagine some people not really being fond of that style of her voice. But I actually think it's really unique. It adds a really odd flavour to the tracks as well. You've got some good features on this album as well. Red to Violet, which has the Jamila Woods feature, where their two voices kind of go against each other a little bit. You've got Jamila's smooth vocals that kind of smooth over some of Addy's strangisms, but the blend is really good as well. And I really like how the beat and the drum pattern sounds a lot like something Isley Brothers would do, particularly Footsteps in the Dark. And of course as well, Thundercat has sampled that in one of his tracks too, which I kind of can see where some of these isms across this album kind of feel like they're birthed out of what Thundercat does. Some of those kinds of squashy beats and those strange instrumentals that you'd get from a Thundercat song really do pop up on this album a lot. Make me want it being exactly that. I mean, the slappity beat, the squashy rhythm, just so Thundercat, man. And I think her voice is naturally so gifted for these kinds of tracks. Anything that's a little bit on the stranger side, not too strange, it's not too weird or anything like that, but anything that does enter that realm does complement her voice really well. I do like the track Adonis. This one feels really playful and silly, especially when she's kind of going, you know you a bad bitch, you know you a bad bitch, and that really strange voice that she's doing feels really silly and quirky. Also reminds me a lot of something Hiatus Coyote would do as well, this track, which I feel, again, some of these comparisons kind of live in this album throughout, and it's kind of just all part of the blend of influences that I think are coming through for Addy here. But yeah, definitely this track particularly reminds me of that, and some others do as well. I find the track Marigold interesting, where it kind of feels like some of the insecurities are being kind of laid out for the listener, where she's kind of talking about how she gets all these labels about how she's firstly not girl enough, and even not boy enough, and not white enough, not straight enough. All these kinds of things that she's kind of just laying out there, and I assume may just be attached to her from maybe outsiders who are listening to her music and never really have branded her as anything in particular, and she's kind of just laying it out there for the listeners to hear about how, you know, she isn't anything really, and she's never going to be enough of those things according to those people. But ultimately, you know, she is enough and she is strong enough, and that kind of ends up being the overall message of the track by the end. I mean, it's pretty positive. I like how weirdly psychedelic this track sounds though. Like, it's so spacey and odd, and again, just adding some elements to the soul sound on this album that I think just sound really cool. I guess in terms of like negatives, some of the lyrics at times, like Multiply, where she's basically talking about how she wants to make a baby, and how she's talking about her ovaries as well. She actually brings up her ovaries on this track. Look, I get the message of the track. I just think these kinds of lyrics get a little bit too on the nose. I think there could have been a better way to present these kinds of lyrics. Also want to mention Naked, which I think, again, lyrically isn't particularly very strong. Although I do think the male feature that comes through reminds me a lot of Miguel, and I think their vocals play off of each other quite nicely, actually. But yeah, aside from the few moments like that lyrically on some of the tracks that are just a bit on the nose, I actually think this style, the psychedelic stuff coming through occasionally, some of the squashier moments, the kind of Thundercat-isms, the soulful sound, the throwback soulful sound, and then the modern neo-soulful sound that comes through across this whole album just makes for a really good listen. You've got the really nice FourSixty track as well. That's a bit more of a chilled out R&B tune by the end of it. Nice way to close the album out, and overall just a really enjoyable listen. Like, I'm finding this album to be really replayable and just a lot of fun. Like, Addie is a cool performer, I think, a really unique voice in the world of neo-soul music, and this is one of the best albums of this genre I've heard in quite a few, maybe years. I don't know, maybe since the Hiatus Coyote album that kind of had a lot of those isms coming through. This might be the best one in that style that I've heard since then. So I'm going to go 8 out of 10. I think this is a really strong album, really fun, really replayable, and I hope you get something out of it as well. If you've not heard this album already and you're first discovering it through me, please listen to it. Let me know your thoughts. If you have already heard it though, also let me know your thoughts. Do have a good day. Subscribe if you haven't already as well. Check out my Patreon for more perks that you can get involved in, and subscribe. Goodbye.